Dominic, you know what it all starts with.
I mean,
Just
this
put that
headline
headline
says
up.
it, huh? Yeah.
Put it
Yeah.
up.
Okay.
I mean, there's nothing else that needs to be said there, but we will talk a little bit more about it. Jon Jones
Of course.
is your new heavyweight champion of the world, and he does it in quick fashion. 2 minutes, 4 seconds of the very first round. He submits Ciryl Gane,
Mm.
a man who had never been submitted in his professional MMA career. Most of this discussion is going to be centered around Jon Jones and his greatness.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm actually going to throw a curveball in here, and I actually want to start with Gane.
Okay. Okay.
So, Dominic, we talked a little bit about this on verbal sparring, what this conversation, depending on how the fight went, could potentially look like in terms of speaking about Ciryl Gane. We have both been very high on him for a long time, even making such bold claims as he's maybe the future of the heavyweight division, the most talented heavyweight of all time, or the potential to be, however you want to
Mm-hmm.
word it. One of the questions that we had on verbal sparring was, who is the fighter you have been the most wrong about, whether it be they over exceeded your expectations or underperformed. Out of I want to take this as no. I hope this doesn't come off as disrespectful to Ciryl Gane. He's still a great talent, but can you say, sitting here now, after you've let it calm down a bit, would you put Ciryl Gane in the fighter you were most wrong about as you sit here today?
I I want to no, I shouldn't even say that. I don't want to say yes. My mind wants me to say yes, I think, but I'm still going to say no, and Noah, this is why. And this is also going to tie into kind of what I said, because I almost backed myself into a corner on the preview show Friday. So just follow along with me here, and I'll tie these together to transition back. But I'm going to say no because look at the losses. It's
Mm.
Francis Ngannou in a fight that was really close. Obviously, the takedowns are what secured that fight for Francis. And I still, even after last night, just think Gane wasn't prepared for Francis to wrestle him. Then last night happens. It's the greatest fighter of all time that he loses to. So I'm going to cut a little slack for the Frenchman for now. So I'm going to say no for now. However, again, tying into what I said Friday, I said, and it's on the record, and that's why I'm being transparent here and bringing it up,
Mm-hmm.
that if he were to get starched and ran through by Jon Jones, I would no longer view Ciryl Gane as that elite, like next level type
Mm-hmm.
heavyweight, right? And of course, what happens? He gets ran through, guys. The only strike that landed that was significant was an illegal strike to the balls of Jon Jones in that fight. That's it.
Some are
So,
saying the biggest strike of the contest.
yeah, and I remember I rode him with Branson, so I remember looking at him and I go, you know, Branson, I said all this about Ciryl on Friday, and now here I am wanting to retract it because Jon Jones is just so good. I think he might run through everybody in the
Mm-hmm.
heavyweight division like he
Well,
just
that's
did Gane
fair.
last
No,
night.
you're allowed to go back on that take. You just,
So I'm gonna leave it out there, but I'm just gonna come back on it a little. I'm gonna retract
mm,
just a little. I still view him as a great talent. But definitely still, regardless of who he lost to, being it was Jon Jones though last night, I'll come down. I'll come down on it. He's no longer that, phenom, next level, elite, never before seen heavyweight. I will say that he no longer is that to me, but he is still a very high tier, high quality heavyweight. So hopefully that's not too, soft on my side, but it's just it,
mm,
it all comes back to me with the greatness of Jon Jones. But before
mm.
we get into that, here we go. You answer your part of the question from verbal sparring as well.
So surprisingly, I'm actually going to say no as well. I think
Okay.
you might have thought I was going to say yes just because I brought it up. And considering on that episode of verbal sparring, which you can go watch right now or
Of
after this
course.
episode's over,
Right.
But um, I think I said, like, if what your scenario you had presented and ended up kind of playing out happened, that I
Yeah.
probably would lean that way. But I've been pretty wrong about some guys, especially in the reverse end. Like we talked about Cody Garbrandt a little bit, who we'll
Mm-hmm.
talk about later. Um, you could look at guys like Mickey Gall. I was pretty high
Mhm.
on, and that didn't obviously work out. And there's a lot of guys, right? So I'm not going to go that far because Dominic, you're right. I think the resume
Yeah.
needs to kind of speak for itself here. And and a wise man once said, "Judge me by my losses, not by my wins." Do you know who that wise man was, Dom?
You're gonna have to enlighten me with the quick pop quiz
That
there.
was, that was Jake Paul after he
Okay.
lost to Tommy Fury.
I didn't know what I was thinking, but I didn't think that.
But in all seriousness, losing to two of the best heavyweights to ever do it. Well, one of the best. I mean, Jon Jones looked incredible, but it
Yeah.
was one fight, right? So it's like, you know, we'll see. But one of the best fighter of all time,
And one of the best heavyweights. There you go.
Francis Ngannou, one of the
Yeah.
most
Yeah.
scariest heavyweights of all time. And in a way, you could kind of look at it as somewhat of a compliment that Gane had forced the scariest power puncher
Yeah.
in MMA history to resort to wrestling to get the win.
Gane was winning on the feet in that fight.
And so, but if you look at Gane's wins, who's his top 4 wins? You got Biggie Boy Rosenstruik,
Mm-hmm.
Alexander Volkov,
Mm-hmm.
Derek Lewis for the interim title, who he finished,
Right.
and Tai Tuivasa, who he finished in the main event in Paris. Most of those fights were not particularly close.
Right.
Even the Tuivasa one, which I know we kind of disagreed on, but
Mhm.
truthfully, it was mostly a
Right.
dominant showing outside of the fact that Tuivasa,
Of course.
dropped him, had him
Yeah.
on the ropes for a minute there. So I still think Gane's an elite heavyweight. Was I
Yeah.
wrong about saying he's the most complete heavyweight we maybe have ever seen? Yes. So
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the problem, Dom. He is an elite heavyweight, an elite skill set in terms of his striking, but his holes are pretty gaping.
Yeah.
And I think that's just what was exposed even more so Saturday. Now, how many guys are going to be able to do to him what Ngannou kind of did or what Jones just
Yeah.
did? I mean, Curtis Blades might,
Right. Right.
but you go beyond that, who's really
Not
going to do
many.
that to him?
Right.
Is Pavlovich going to do that to him?
Not the way he's
I mean,
been fighting.
yeah, I didn't think Ngannou would, but you
Yeah.
never know. Tuivasa obviously didn't do that to him. You go down, he's beat some of these guys who would come up next.
Yeah. For sure.
So I think Gane is going to be in the contender picture for a long time.
I agree.
Depending on how long he wants to fight, and assuming he doesn't, regress, crazy amount. He's 32, right? So
Yep.
he's still got at least, at heavyweight, they last a little longer usually with their years, and he doesn't have like a ton of professional MMA experience. So it's not like the fight years would be weighing him down. But that striking skill set is advanced at heavyweight. So many heavyweights have really big power, but their actual technical boxing or kickboxing is not.
There's only a few.
Yeah, look at like Tuivasa or Derek Lewis. Like these guys are great, fought for titles or at least came close to it. But really, they're not like technical boxers or technical strikers. They have crazy power, great timing, all that. But that's just how heavyweight is. Ciryl Gane is advanced in that level.
Oh, undoubtedly. Yeah.
It's just that I just don't think he is as complete of a mixed martial artist as I once believed. I think I was I mean, you could probably, tell me if you feel differently, but I was probably convinced that he was based off of some anomalies, getting like the submission win on Dante Mays.
Well, I think that's the thing, right? We saw the success offensively, never had to even sweat him on the defensive side. So you just assume, like, oh, well, he's probably pretty good on the ground. We just don't really see him, have to play defense on that side of things. Then you've seen it in 2 of his last 3 fights that there is a pretty clear hole. And what did Jon Jones say all week? There's a clear hole. There's clear gaps. There's clear weaknesses. He went in and did everything he said he was going to do with those weaknesses. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good way to transition. I don't know if we really need to match make for Gane. He's going to be getting a pretty big fight
right now.
Does he fight the loser Blades Pavlovich? I think that's probably a pretty good option, but we'll see.
Yeah.
But whoever it is, it'll probably be in a fight night headliner or pretty big on a main card. He's not going away.
No.
And now transition into the conversation about Jon Jones, who greatest of all time. I mean, this was a hard one for Dominic to say because he
Yeah.
Not only due to the resume, of course, of Anderson Silva, which I think
Mhm.
stands on his own as that minimum top 3
Yeah.
of all time, but
Thank
also
you.
your personal
Yeah.
love for Anderson Silva, has
Yeah.
obviously carried that as well some. You
Yeah.
even said it last night, like, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Even though I don't think you were necessarily denying it before, but,
Right.
I think
I didn't
now
want to
there's
let go of Anderson.
for more people out there, it seemed like it was somewhere holding on to GSP.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a
True.
lot of it, and some people may still feel that way because of the whole PED
Hmm.
argument. And, I'm not going to tell anybody they're wrong. But in terms of the best fighter I've ever seen in MMA, you cannot deny it's not Jon Jones. If you want to disqualify him, that's fine. But he is the best mixed
Yeah.
martial artist of all time. And I mean, that's what everybody's going to say on these podcasts. I won't harp on just saying that over and over again. He called a shot here, Dom. Some of us wondered if maybe he was being a little bit too confident, overlooking some of the talent Gane obviously had in the standing department.
Mm.
Jon Jones, 3-year layoff, first fight at heavyweight. Some were looking at his physique on fight week and saying, "Ooh,
I
looking a
didn't
little
like
chubby,"
those.
which
Yeah.
I never really bought into that. Maybe it's
Yeah.
because I'm just fat myself, and I was just like happy to see a guy like him
Right. Yeah.
just doing it like one of us.
Yeah.
Or maybe I
Yeah.
was thinking, wait, I could be Jon Jones if I just cut down to
Right.
205.
There you
No,
go. There you go.
but he. My question for you, I guess, to start this may come to you as like a very softball, like easy question to answer, but I just want you to think about it.
Okay.
Did Jon Jones answer every question we had going in about how he would transition to heavyweight?
Okay. Well, Friday, one of the bigger. We talked about a lot of questions and storylines
There's a
previewing the
lot. Some
fight.
of them we didn't even talk about,
Right.
probably.
One of the main ones was, have we already seen the best of him?
Mhm.
Gonna say no. Gonna say no to that. I can for sure check that one off because
Yeah.
you look at what he did last night, and then you look at those last couple performances at light heavyweight. He said it was a lack of motivation, wasn't excited for the fights. He was fighting not to lose rather than fighting to win.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's exactly the narrative. That's exactly based off of what I saw last night in 2 minutes. That's that answer. What are some of the? I mean, how would he fill out with the weight? How would his strength carry over? What is grappling work here against a guy that he's never fought this big
Would he have
before?
ring rust,
Would he have ring rust? Absolutely. I mean, absolutely not. To every one of those other questions, Is there a box I'm trying to think of? Uh, I can't think of any
Yeah.
questions that he didn't answer last night, and it's sickening to say that. No, we didn't get to see much. I remember looking at you, the fight ended. I'm like, huh? What happened?
We were
The
shocked.
fight's over in two
Nobody
minutes.
nobody could tell that choke was in. It seemed like he almost just tapped, like he was just like, "Well,
And
I'm in a bad position here."
that was enough for me to say all I'm saying right now on today's show. Yep.
Yeah.
Checked all the boxes,
Mm.
answered all my questions. Yeah, he did. The fact, and he's only 35 still, man. And
Mhm.
have you been seeing all the stuff on Twitter today? This is Sunday when we're recording this. That aftermath day, everybody's going crazy on Twitter. You know how it is the day after pay-per-views. And I'm seeing pictures of 2011, Jon Jones winning the title for the first time. I'm thinking in 2011, 12 years ago, I was 11, 12 years old. Now I'm 24, going on 25 next month, watching Jon Jones come back after a layoff and win another title. He's been winning championships for 12 years. He's been winning nothing but championships, Noah.
Yeah,
That's greatness. That is greatness that we've never seen in this sport and probably never going to see again.
I can't get the quote down word for word, but I listened to Dana White's post-fight press conference this morning, and they were asking him, of course, about some of Jon Jones' transgressions out of the octagon and for him to come back from them and all this stuff. He said something like, was that many men or women fighters who rode the straight and narrow never took their focus off of preparing for the next fight, off of preparing for their next opponent, who did everything right, the right way,
Mm-hmm.
will never accomplish half of what Jon Jones did, despite
Yeah.
having one of the most chaotic, careers in and out of the octagon you can have. That's greatness.
Yeah.
You don't have to like the guy. Actually, I think that's a fair
yeah.
thing. Obviously, we don't know him, but
Right.
based off of some of the things he's been accused of or been convicted of, you know, questionable character to be nice, and
Yeah.
that's fine. But in terms of when you view the sport of MMA, he is the
Yeah.
best example. When you watch someone in the octagon, there is no better example of greatness in this sport. He is Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
He is, I mean, who do you want to say for like baseball? Barry Bonds.
Yeah.
He's Tom Brady.
Right. Right.
That is who he is for our sport. And you don't have to like that, but we have to accept that that's who he is.
Yeah.
And despite that, to answer the question I gave you, I think he answered the biggest questions for sure. I mean, the big question marks, how would he look against a heavyweight opponent? How would his strength hold up against Gane, who's not a weakling?
No,
He's a
not at
pretty
all.
strong guy.
Yeah.
How would his grappling hold up? Held up pretty well.
Yeah.
Would there be any ring rust? Nope.
Nope.
But I do think there could be some questions still going forward. And I think that's what makes it so exciting as we look ahead to his next fight, which looks like it'll be against the heavyweight GOAT, Stipe Miocic. And we'll talk about that here in a second. But, we didn't see really how his speed adjusted to heavyweight in terms of like the striking. I think he did a great job of, taking him down, getting control right away. His strength looked great, like in top position.
Yeah.
And of course, to be able to Dana described it like he made Gane look kind of like a baby, like he was like ragdolling him around. And that was basically what we saw.
Yeah.
But we really didn't see anything in the striking. And that's not a knock on him. It was such a dominant performance that it's hard to answer those questions. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to doubt the guy. I bet on him because I said I can handle being a guy who bet on the best of all time, who's undefeated. Well, technically undefeated. To lose his first fight, I can stomach that. I can't stomach betting against the best
GOAT
to ever do it and him go out there and do GOAT shit, which is what he did. But there are going to be some very interesting questions that pop up for that next fight. And it's not just him either. Stipe is going to have to answer some of those questions. So,
yeah,
I do think it was just worth bringing up. It's not a knock on his performance. You can't knock that performance.
No.
But, Dom, it's somewhat of a prolonged version of like Conor McGregor knocking out Jose Aldo in 13 seconds.
Yeah.
So many question marks about if Conor could really do it at that time.
Yeah.
He does it, but it was so quick.
So fast. Yeah.
That everybody probably still had some questions.
Yeah.
If they ran that back, what would happen?
Right.
How's he going to do trying to make title defenses? Well, I mean, his career went pew, so we never really got a lot of answers to those questions, but that's what you had to take away at the time. It is the kind of performance, it's legacy defining in some ways. But yeah, do you kind of agree with that? Like in terms of what we saw, that there are still questions, but
they're
that's
new
not
questions.
A knock on the performance. Yeah, they're the questions that were a little lower. On the totem
now
pole have now been shot up to the top.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree. And I think it actually bodes well with what I want to bring up here. He said this. Now, I didn't get to see his actual post-fight press conference, but he did the quick hitter post-fight interview on ESPN with John Anik. And, I always blank on the guy's name from SportsCenter, but he did that for SportsCenter after the fights last night.
Max Kellerman or something?
No, I can't remember his name.
Right,
I'll find it.
I won't hold you
up. He said that going into the Stipe fight, he had a great quote, by the way, about the Stipe thing, how he's wanted this fight forever, a GOAT versus a GOAT. It's going to be big. I think it could have been bigger at one point, but it's still pretty massive now, especially that Jon's the champion. So the fight's huge. But he said, not nonchalantly, but just quickly, and then they kind of kept talking about the fight, and I'm like, that's interesting. He said, I'm looking forward to, cutting down, getting a little bit leaner for the Stipe fight, losing a little weight, coming in a little cleaner with the physique and whatnot. And I thought, okay, interesting. Stipe mentioned to Megan O'Leary last night in a quick hitter after the event. They took his ass so fast backstage, by the way, after that main event, and it was crazy. That dude had to be huffing and puffing talking to Megan.
He teleported.
But, it was crazy. They put him on a golf cart or something. But he said he weighed 253 pounds. That's the biggest Stipe's ever weighed, as far as my memory serves me, which would weigh more than both Gane and Jones last night. So that's I think that adds some things, because Stipe's always been pretty quick in terms of the boxing anyway. Not like footwork like Gane, but quick hands, good boxer. So with him putting on more size, how's he going to look? For Jon, I think it's really something to consider here. If he looked like his physique was fine, a little chub, what's it matter? Did you see the muscle on the guy? I mean, he's physically insanely strong. So the fact that he wants to come in leaner to have a bit more speed for a guy like Stipe, I think kind of ties hand in hand with that question that you just brought up. So did you hear about that? What are your kind of thoughts on that if you hadn't heard it yet? And I think that just morphs well with what you just brought up, to be quite frank.
Well, I hadn't heard it, but my immediate thought was that I think that's a smart idea, and it's not because of any which way he looked here, but consider the matchup.
Yeah.
He came in heavier because, in a lot of ways, you probably knew that his advantage was going to be to take this fight with Gane to the ground in the wrestling. So being heavier than him would help in holding that top position, getting control time. It was so quick. I mean, some of that stuff didn't even end up being in question. With Stipe, you know, this fight could be fought primarily on the feet. Stipe's got great wrestling himself.
Yes, for sure.
Now, we've seen Stipe, Daniel Cormier took him down maybe once in their third fight. And I think Stipe was able to either get back up, or I don't remember exactly how that went. But Stipe is a guy who we've not seen, you know, off his back like at all through his UFC career, which is an interesting dynamic in of itself, because we just saw with Ciryl Gane in a different set of circumstances, a guy who had shown a lot of promise in terms of his submission capabilities with leg locks and maybe with his offensive wrestling looking pretty good. And then he gets put on his back and he looks almost kind of lost out there. I don't expect Stipe to look like that. I think there's a reason why the man's never or rarely been put on his back. But I wonder if Jones looks at it like, if I can get leaner, build up some of that speed.
Yeah.
If I can simply be faster with the footwork, faster with the hands, stay on the outside and pick Stipe apart with his shots. And that's an interesting kind of style fight right there, because Stipe is known for his boxing. So, I mean, now we're kind of talking about the Stipe fight, and I think that's fair to transition into. You guys know that's really all that's left to be said about the Stipe fight, or the Jones Gane fight. Like, so quick. I mean, we spent more time talking about it than the fight actually took place.
Yeah.
So Stipe has been confirmed to be the next matchup. They don't know, you know, they're not confirming when it's going to be. All signs seem to point to
the big
International Fight Week in July. They're going to be massive in Las Vegas if that is the fight. How do you feel about Dominic? Because you obviously, if people are unaware, maybe newer fans to this channel, me and Dominic are two of the bigger Stipe fans you will find. That's nice. Nice. You know, we are from Ohio, so you know, we tend to feel that way about Ohio fighters, and Stipe was our guy. From, you know, when I first started watching, and Dominic at the time kind of getting us into it. Then we went and saw him defend against Overeem in Cleveland. How are you feeling about that fight right now?
Well, my immediate reaction, and I think it's pretty fair regardless of my fandom for Stipe, is yikes. And I'm saying that as nicely as I can, because regardless if Stipe was next, if Sergey Pavlovich was next, if my boy Tom Aspinall was next, I'd be saying the same thing. Yikes. This is a scary man to have as the champion right now, man. I mean, 35 years old, still has plenty of fight years left. And Jon Jones becoming the champ now, newly, you know, reinvented himself. This is only his first fight back, and he looked that good. You got to think he's only going to look better in his second fight, right? Is that fair to at least assume for now? So, I don't know. It's definitely an interesting match. I remember we've talked about this potential fight for really since the beginning of the podcast, because that's when, you know, DC and Stipe were kind of at the heat of their rivalry, finishing that rivalry off. So this has always been a topic of discussion, you know, here and there from 2020, 2021, you know, for 3 years now. And now we're finally going to get it. And 4 months time. And that's just, it's crazy. It's huge. It doesn't get much bigger than this. But going into any fight moving forward, until proven otherwise, I have to lean the side of Jon Jones. And it's just, it's greatness, man. Again, it's just history. You don't get to see stuff like this much. It's going to be a big one, though, man. He's right. I mean, this is the greatest of all time, pound for pound, weight class wise, versus the greatest heavyweight of all time. And I think there is something to be said there. If Stipe, because how many times have we said this? It just feels like with the way Stipe's been going, he's been out for what'll be 30 months, give or take, by the time July rolls around. His legacy has already been cemented. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So, like, any other wins are just cherries on top. But a win over Jon Jones, that's a little bit more than just a cherry on top, man. And for Jon, if he can beat Stipe, it's almost just like he can't get any better now. He's just putting himself higher and higher above all those the GSPs, the Silvas, the Mighty Mouses. He's just putting himself
Mhm.
way ahead of them. That's what this fight is. So I mean, belt on the line, that's cool and all, but legacy wise, this is huge. I say that all that about Stipe's legacy being cemented, but if he goes in here and beats Jon Jones, it ain't cemented. They're gonna have to pour some new pavement if he beats Jon Jones. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
It's sick, man. It's awesome.
Yeah. Gosh, like you're bringing up really good points there about if Stipe beats Jon Jones, all of a sudden the conversation sort of changes a little bit. I don't know
Yeah,
if you can say Jones or Stipe is like the best ever, but all of a sudden, I mean, you got to
he
at
throws
least,
himself into the list.
yeah, like in our personal opinion, he's top 10 all time. And
Yeah,
I hope most people might agree with that. But if he were to beat Jones, he's probably shooting up. I mean, we're talking Anderson Silva,
yeah,
GSP, Jon Jones territory.
yeah.
I mean, in all honesty, especially to
Right.
do that at heavyweight, which has been a division with so much turnover at the top and in the championship position, to be that constant
Yeah,
and
and
you
he'll
get a
be what,
win.
40, 41 years old too. Like,
Oh my gosh, is that the case? That's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah.
I worry about it though for our boy Stipe.
I
I
think you
do.
have
I
to.
well, I worried about it when we talked about it in 2020. I always
Yeah,
thought
yeah.
the idea of those two fighting, I always sort of favored Jones in that matchup. And now that we haven't
You
seen Stipe since March of 2021,
won, and you've seen John at heavyweight
yeah,
now.
we
It's
just
like,
saw Jones at heavyweight. Like this time off for Stipe, can you really say it's a good thing for him to be gone this long? I mean,
mm,
it's kind of weird because we're just talking about a guy who just took a 3-year layoff and came back
yeah,
looking as
you're right.
good, if not better, than he was in his last few fights. But I don't know if I see that same trajectory potentially for Stipe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying he can't win the fight. He
Mm-hmm.
is, I mean, I was breaking down the matchup to you, and it was kind of convincing me in my own head his chances being better than like what Gon showed here.
Yeah.
But potentially, I mean, this is a guy who has, his vulnerabilities have been exposed before in terms of, he did get knocked out by DC with the short punch and the clinch. And you looked, I mean, obviously Ngannou sent him to
Yeah.
the
That.
shadow realm. That was not fun.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if Jones can do that or not on the feet, but it that creates just a great dynamic for another super intriguing fight. But even if you just take the matchup out of it, Stipe just at this point in his career, is the fire really still there?
He presents it as it is, but I think it's a different thing
Really? Because
what we get in the
maybe
cage.
he says it, but when I see him like speaking to Megan O'Leary last night when they teleported him
Yeah.
backstage,
Yeah.
I didn't see him speaking like a guy who was. I mean, he's always
Yeah.
kind of talked. He's never
I
really
think
talked the
that's the.
talk like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I guess maybe I just want a little more fire for what could
Yeah.
potentially be
That's
the
fair.
biggest fight of your career and your last fight of your career.
Yeah.
But I'm sure priorities have changed for Stipe. He's a
Yeah.
full-time firefighter. He's got his family, his kid, he's got his grill.
Yeah. Of course.
You know, fighting's not really a large part of his life probably anymore.
Right. Right. Yeah.
But again, that just leads me to be even more concerned about it because Jones has had his eyes on this fight forever. When the
Yeah.
guy who is the more technically more accomplished fighter, and right now I would say the better fighter, seems hungrier,
Hmm.
that's a little cause for concern.
Jon said something like that last night as well in that same little interview that I was
Oh,
referencing earlier. When he was talking about the quick little, I'm gonna get leaner, yada yada yada. They talked about the Stipe fight, and he gave him all the praise, right? Goat versus goat. I've been
mhm.
wanting this. I'm ready for this. Showed his respect, and stuff. But then again, in the most Jon Jones way, again, guys, he's top 3 shit talker of all time. I'm gonna go out and say that one on today's show. He may do it differently than Connor, but the way in
Yeah.
which he does it is quite methodical.
So subtle, but it just
Yes. Yeah.
pierces you.
All their jabs. And so last night he goes, Stipe, I respect you. I think you're a great human, a great American, the firefighting, the family man. He said, if I'm you, I'm taking some time away from the fire trucks, the fire station, because if you're not 100% focused on me, I'll essentially run through you. I'm paraphrasing here, but he said, my sole focus in my life is beating you, and I'm not going to beat Stipe Miocic. I will finish Stipe Miocic. That's all paraphrasing, but that's a large part what he said. And he said that, man, and that relates again to what you just said with, is that fire there for Stipe? Is he hungry enough to take on a rejuvenated lion in Jon Jones? We'll see. We'll see.